So today we're going to be doing a tutorial on handstand hops, and of course, as a disclaimer that I have to give, this is my perspective based on my training, my experience, my observation. This isn't the ultimate handstand hops tutorial. It's just one way to think about it. My handstand hops are not the best. There are people out there with really amazing hops that if you're really interested in training, you should definitely check out their work. All I'm doing is just giving you a perspective so you can think about it and hopefully start to develop an approach towards learning and acquiring the skill. So first, we're going to go into gear and prerequisites. You do not need any specialized equipment to learn handstand hops. However, a matted floor is not bad. If you have only a hard floor, it's okay, but until you learn how to soften the movement, you might feel a little bit more force, a little bit more pounding in the joints, especially in the beginning when your technique is more rough and not as refined. I don't recommend an uneven surface, something like grass. And the issue is that grass is never completely flat, so you might land on your wrist in a different angle that you weren't used to. So if you're training on something like grass, for example, especially if you're still new to the skill, you might tweak your wrist because you landed a way that you weren't used to because of the variable of the ground. So I don't recommend something uneven. You don't need a spring floor or anything like that, and I feel actually it's probably better if you don't train on a spring floor, because if you do too much you rely too much on the floor, you don't build as much of your own power. And then also the spring floor, it involves a little bit of a different timing, so depending on which technique of handstand hops you're trying to use, if you learn it only on a spring floor, that technique and timing may not apply to other floors. So best thing to have is a somewhat soft floor, but not too soft, and a floor that's even, that's uniform all the way around. And then because we're doing handstand hops, you do have to be comfortable in a handstand. Now, it may not be what you think, so the handstand balance, you don't need to necessarily have a very balanced handstand in order to learn hops, because that specific sensation of gripping and balancing isn't really something you use when you jump. So you could have zero balance in a handstand and still be able to do handstand hops. And actually, you'll see this a lot of breakdancers, for example. They do one-arm hops all day, but they can't balance on one arm. And it's because it's a completely different technique, even though it seems like the two are related. But what you do need as far as physical prerequisites is you need to be strong in the handstand. The position should not be a physical challenge to you, because if you have trouble doing a static load of a handstand, when you jump, the weight's going to increase during those moments. So you want to have a strong and stable handstand, not necessarily one that you can balance, although it's always nice if you can balance, but this idea that you can hold it for a while and you can change position and you can move your shoulders. You don't need to do handstand push-ups or anything like that unless you're going for one of the variations that I show later. But at the very least, I don't have a good wall here, but at the very least, like if you can hold against the wall and you can do some shrugs and elbow bends and you're comfortable with these little movements and you can hold for a while, that's probably a good place to be. You want to make sure that you're strong and comfortable in the handstand, and if you're still working your basic handstand, you probably don't need to be messing around with hops. Okay, and one detail we do need to address before doing any kind of jumping on the hands is this idea of the dynamic handstand form. So if you watch some of my videos or courses, I talk about the static handstand form, where you want the elbows locked and you want this structurally supported position. So there's a slight modification when it comes to dynamic skills, because the difference is that in a static handstand, the force is a constant of your body weight. In a dynamic handstand, it fluctuates, it goes up and down, and there are moments where it's more than your body weight and there is a potential impact. So the difference with not only handstand hops, but also, again, any kind of dynamic handstand-based skill, whether it's a cartwheel or a handspring or anything like that. Again, this isn't the only method. This is just my perspective, what I'm teaching now, is rather than be like this, the elbows are still mechanically straight, but I don't want to say slightly bent because it's not a good verbal cue. You don't want to think bending your elbows, but you want the elbows to be soft enough that if you had to absorb force, they would bend this way and not that way. So even this happened to me once when I was training one-arm hops. My elbow was a little bit hyperextended at the bottom, and no serious injury came from it, but I did tweak it a little bit because you want the elbow to go that way if you have to absorb force. So this idea, like even if I'm doing a cartwheel, for example, with straight elbows, try not to hit this ceiling fan, my straight elbows in a cartwheel are actually a little bit like this because if I had to bend to absorb, I want to absorb it in the safe direction. Whereas my straight elbows in just a static handstand are going to be completely locked out because I know I'm holding myself there. So again, this isn't the only technique. In gymnastics, it might be a little bit different. So for me, this is more kind of like hard floor street technique, understanding that if you have to bend to soften, that's generally safer and less force on the body because you're using your springs. So it's just one detail to keep in mind if you are doing hops or other dynamic skills, is going from this kind of handstand position to something more like this to account for that. And one other thing to think about in terms of modification of dynamic handstand skill versus static or balancing is the weight distribution on the hand. So typically with any of these dynamic skills, hops especially, you want more of the force to stay in the heel of the hand because that's your structural support. Sometimes when people are balancing, it might be more towards the knuckles, somewhat towards the fingers. You don't want to be there if you're jumping and landing, because again, if you hit a weird spot, if your shoulder angle's off and the force goes like this, okay, you have that structural support. But if the force goes like that, you can jam your wrist and it won't be fun. So, and that doesn't mean you're going to be heel, heel, heel. I still utilize a lot of this. I'm rolling through my fingers to soften it, but I'm only rolling. I'm always finishing on the heel of the hand. You don't want to be jumping on the knuckles or on the fingers because that's going to be a lot of pressure on the wrist. So again, it's just something to think about in terms of how I modify a dynamic skill versus a static skill. Okay, so it may seem like handstand hops are this intense upper body strength exercise, but it's really not that. There's a few different forms, and I'll show you a couple that are a little bit more upper body intensive, but it's really more about the coordination of the legs. It's the legs that provide the lift, and the arms just help. The arms just finish it. But if you're thinking about pushing with the arms, the hops are probably going to be very muscled unless you're insanely strong, or they're just not going to feel good, or they're just not going to work at all. So it's this idea of understanding how to drive the legs up in a way that provides lift. So this is an exercise you can try. If you have something soft, it's good. Be careful a little bit. So it's this idea. I'm going to extend the knees, right? I'm going to extend. And what I want to feel is that this extension lifts me. I get a little bit lighter. And now what I can do is if I do the extension and abruptly stop the extension, the force continues into my body. So what I can do, again, be careful with this one, especially if you're on a hard floor, show discretion, but you can jump on your back like that, right? Landing's not very soft, so I'm not going to do too many of those, but it's this idea that you can make yourself jump, not a huge amount, I'm not going 2 feet in the air, but you can get lift just by throwing your legs in a specific way. So if you have like a mattress, something soft, you can do much higher reps of these. I wouldn't recommend doing too many on the hard floor. I'm just doing a couple for reference. Make sure, especially if you're doing it on a hard floor, keep your chin tucked so you don't land on your head. But it's this extension, timing, and then you can even do multiple extension, things like that, just to get used to it. It's a weird drill, it's really goofy looking, but ultimately, once you get into the handstand hop itself, that is more important than the actual arms. The arms just do a little bit of push, but the legs are actually the main driver, and especially if you want to do some of the continuous handstand hop variations, it's almost all legs. Almost all legs. So it's, again, another concept to think about before starting to do the actual handstand hop themselves. So let's get into the handstand hops themselves. There's like 5 basic forms that I'm going to show. None of them are right or wrong, it's your preference. Some of them are more strength-based, some of them are more about aesthetics. You're gonna see some circus artists use more, you're gonna see some that b-boys use more, you're gonna see one that's a little bit more gymnastics prioritized. So they're all different, it's just, again, a perspective to think about the skill. So the first one is gonna be the tuck, right? And we're not going to do hops right away, just going to try to feel the leg drive in the handstand. So you're going to go like this and then extend. Again, I'm not holding the handstand, I'm not balancing the handstand. It's just about getting used to tucking the legs and lifting up. So again, right? And I want to start to feel that extension. So that one, I extended a little bit more and I kept the shoulders pushed out, and what happened was that I hopped a little bit. The hops shouldn't be high. I'll talk later about the mistakes, but you actually don't want to hop that high, especially if you want continuous hops. Now it's different if you're a gymnast training for vault or like a big tumbling push. So you can even go tuck like that, so you can go straight into the tuck. You don't have to go from a straight handstand, but it's just one hop. And this idea of extending the legs fast enough and continuing. I'm giving a little bit of a shoulder shrug, but if I only try to use my shoulders, I can't really hop. I don't have enough power. Now, if I bend my arms and start to do kind of a push-up, then maybe I can get some more power from it, but it's muscled. So it's this idea of let the legs do the work. One more time. That was all legs, so I'm doing very little with the arms, just getting used to tucking, extending. Okay, so you want to build a lot of reps, you want to get used to doing just that single, just getting used to hopping. Typically, you're going to go a little bit backwards. I'll talk later about forward handstand hops, those are actually a lot more difficult. So if you're traveling mostly up and a little bit backwards, that's a good direction to go. Again, I'm staying mostly on the heel of my hands. When I land, I'm doing a little bit of this to soften. I might be doing a little bit of elbow catch like this, depending on the height, depending if I have to absorb the force because I'm trying to be soft. But generally, you do want to think about staying pushed out on the shoulders. And if you want to, you can add a little bit more of a shrug during that extension. So the next step after you're getting really solid with one is to reset. So notice on these, I stayed extended. I can't do another hop like that if I wanted to do them continuous. So what I want to do next is I extend and I come right back. I reset so I'm ready for the next one. So, rather than staying extended, because when I can do that reset, then I can do a second one. All that I'm gonna do is just extend the legs and push the shoulders again, so then you start to build that timing. So you go, So see, now I did two. How did I do two? Timing. I'm not doing very much with the shoulders other than just staying pushed out. It's the power of the legs and the timing of the extension and coming back. So I time the extension of the legs and the tucking with the hop and the landing. So this is why actually you don't want to hop too high because it messes up your timing, it messes up your push. So the hops should be pretty low, right? Like that. And then I can just do as many as I want. I can keep it going. So 1, 2, 3. Those are a little bit bigger hops. I can do them a little bit quicker. Right? So you can play with the rhythm and the timing. Depends on your form, your flexibility. Like, I know that my tuck isn't very compressed right now. It's a little bit more open, so it's something you can deal with. And if you don't have a very good tuck handstand, there's another modification that you can make that I'll show you in a little bit. But you get that single, then you get single reset. And once you're good with that single reset, you do 2, you do 3, you can start to continuously do these handstand hops. So maybe if your shoulder flexibility isn't that great, you're a little bit closed in the shoulders in your handstand, you have more of like an old school banana kind of style handstand, or you're just not that comfortable with the tuck, The other option that you can do is you keep the hips in line and you do a heel drive like this. So rather than hip and knee extension, it's just pure knee extension. It's you'll see this more in the old school hand balancers. The new school hand balancers with more open shoulders are more likely to use tuck for their jump, but you'll see in the old school days a lot more of that hip extended with heel drive. So that looks like this, right? It's a different movement, so you have to get used to it. But then it's the same thing. You build that rhythm, you do one reset, and then you continue. And then of course, you practice more to get it smooth and consistent and all of that. But that's, again, a modification you can make if you're not as comfortable with your tuck handstand. Another version of the handstand walk that you're going to see, I think this one is one of the cooler looking variations, but it's a little bit more difficult to coordinate, is the split. So basically you split the legs back and forth, and the hop happens during the moment that they're together. So you have to figure out your flexibility, how aggressive you need to be with the splits. The first basic move is, again, just the coordination. So kick, switch, 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 like that. And again, I'm not doing any balance, so my hands are completely turned off. I'm not gripping. It's just about feeling that timing and that rhythm. If you're less flexible, you can bend your knees. This is a move that you don't have to have straight legs for. There's a lot of stylistic variations. So next version is you do one, right? And then ba, ba, kick, ba, ba. So I haven't practiced these in a while either, so my timing and coordination is a little bit off. I think sometimes one is harder than doing multiple, but yeah, once you have that, the timing of the legs and the push with the arms and how that hop happens and how the reset happens, just like the other drills, you go for multiple. So, just two. I can probably do better than that. So, and there's moments, right? Like I said, I'm not something I've been training lately, so sometimes I'm catching with a little bit closed shoulders, sometimes I'm bending. What that does is it changes, I lose the rhythm of the hop because I have to absorb. So this is all, the calibration is all stuff that you do as you get more reps in and you start to understand, okay, how do I keep the rhythm? How do I lose the rhythm? What did I do wrong? What do I need to do to fix it? So, and these are typically going to be a little bit slower pace than the tucks or the heel drive because the movement to extend is much bigger. But that's another really cool option for your handstand hops. I think it looks the best out of all of them for sure. Another form of the handstand hop that you'll typically see in gymnastics is the kick up. It's basically a handstand kick with a shoulder push. The difference, typically gymnasts are performing it on spring floor and they're not really doing, you can't do continuous because you don't have leg drive. You have the momentum of the kick and then the push of the shoulder. And what gymnasts are using this for is to get a big shoulder block either for their vaulting or for their tumbling. So it's a little bit different. It's one that doesn't quite work as well on a hard floor, but you can still do it. So you're gonna do this big gymnastics kick to handstand like this. Right, you keep the shoulder line, and then what's going to happen is the moment you touch the hands, you go boo, right? So like this. A little bit more difficult on a hard floor, and another way that you can do it to get more momentum is you scoop underneath like this. So I scoop like this. So you can really only do one. If you have enough power and momentum, you might be able to get a couple bounces out of it, but typically it's just about that first one. Now, I don't use this one as much because it's not as soft. You kind of stay locked out and you can't do it continuously. So this is another version of the handstand hop, but again, it's more specific towards gymnastic skills, but I still wanted to include it because it's another form of the exercise that you can play with. So if you notice, the gymnastics kick went forwards. That was the first one that went forwards. All of the other continuous ones we did went backwards. Backwards is more efficient, and backwards is going to allow you to absorb the jump more. So the final version of the handstand hop that we're going to do today is the handstand long jump. This one is very intense on the upper body. This is something that I would recommend being able to at least do a few handstand push-ups on the wall, because it does take a lot more strength. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually hit your static handstand, and then you're going to use your legs and your shoulders to jump forward. So you're going to bend your heels back like this. You're gonna swing the legs, and then you're gonna push with the upper body and catch yourself. Probably should have warmed up more, but we'll see what it looks like. So you're gonna hit your handstand like that. That was not the cleanest. It's been a while since I've done it. So ba, 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 right? So this one, again, as you can see, it's a lot more strength intensive, so you do have to have quite a strong upper body. This is going to build a lot of power. I'm noticing that mine are not very strong right now, so maybe it's something I'm going to add into my training, because this is a really good drill to build a lot of upper body power. But it's still a combination, so you're not using only arms. It's when the heels extend, that's when you push, and then it's a long jump, right? Like that. So you're trying to get distance. You're trying to go forward as far as possible. And if you can do a few in a row, that's pretty good. So that's the last manifestation of the handstand hop that we're going to cover today. Like common mistakes, the first one is probably the most technical mistake, is especially if you want to do continuous jumps, is jumping too high. Because if you want to maintain a continuous rhythm, ba, 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 ba. Because if you jump too high, you go ba, ba, ba. And then the rhythm is broken, and then also you have to absorb a lot more. So if I'm doing low jumps, maybe I just go like this with my shoulders, but if I jump too high, then I have to catch it like this, and that takes time, and now my rhythm is off. So especially if you're doing any kind of continuous jumps, like you have to play with how high you want to go, but low jumps are easier to get consistency, and you can even go so low that your whole hand doesn't lift. Maybe the fingers still kind of stay on the floor. Again, how high you want to go is up to you. If you want to do like a clapping handstand push-up or something like that, which I'm not going to show right now because I've been able to do them, but I don't know if I have it right now, and I want to work back up to it. If you want to do a clapping handstand push-up, then yeah, you need more time in the air. So you do want to jump as high as possible, but you're going to have to catch yourself. So it's going to be more difficult to do them continuous, or it's going to have a slower rhythm. So not jumping too high, or at least figuring out what the height of the jump is that you want and how to coordinate that. It's not necessarily a mistake, but if you're thinking of it from a technical side, you want to make it easy. So if you're using too much muscle, it's not making it easy. You're making it more difficult than it has to be. So really think about the legs doing the work and the arms following. And anything that's a skill, unless your goal is to get stronger from it, to build this kind of physical adaptation, that's a different story. Then you want it to be as hard as possible, which a couple of exercises are. But if you're thinking about it as a skill, you want to make it as easy as possible. So you want to rely as much on your timing, your technique, and your structural support as you can, so that you're not physically drained from doing the move, so you can do the move more times. And then of course, with that talk of technique, the main portion of the technique is the positioning of your body, but more importantly, the coordination of your legs and upper body. So the move, the kick, the positions. So that's something, and if you're not getting it in the handstand, you can break it down, right? Do it in a headstand, do it on your back. But even if you do, something like this, and just try to figure out, try to coordinate that movement. Don't be afraid to take a step back to develop an understanding of what you need to do and build those steps. But nothing that I haven't repeated already, but the positioning and the coordination and the movement of the legs is number one. That's what's going to get you your technique and your timing and your continuous hops. If you have a good technique and you use a better structural support, it's going to take less strength to do the move, but it is possible that you're just not strong enough, not conditioned enough. right? So if you're not comfortable with your handstand, the handstand hops are a level of difficulty beyond that because of the movement and the force that's involved. So it could just be that you need to practice handstands more. Maybe you think you're ready for handstand hops. Maybe you just need another couple months of conditioning before you're physically ready to do them safely or to do them well. So it could be, you might be collapsing because of your technique, but it is possible that you're not strong enough, and it's not a bad thing to be stronger than you need to be able to do the skill. So that's another thing to think about as well. It may be your actual strength and conditioning that's causing your mistakes. Okay, so those are my thoughts on handstand hops. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. Hopefully it gives you a perspective on how to do it, how to learn it, how to break it down. Again, this is not the ultimate handstand hop tutorial. It's just a few tips and suggestions based on my personal experience. My handstand hops are not the best. There's a lot of people who are really good at jumping on their hands, especially a lot of break dancers to watch. So definitely check out different techniques, different variations. But yeah, let me know if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what else you'd like to see. If you like my content and wish to support me financially, I have ebooks and courses that I sell. I'm also open to traveling and teaching workshops in person. Might start doing more online stuff again. I'm still considering it, so that might be something for the future. But as always, let me know what you think, what you're interested in, what you'd like to see. Give a thumbs up, whatever, like, share, subscribe, and I appreciate you.